Hi everybody, good morning. See you all in the back. Everybody can hear me okay? Hi Daniel Davis, thanks for coming to my presentation. So, I'm here today to talk a bit about Extensible Web. But I'll tell you ahead of time, I'm not going to try in 40 minutes to get too far into the technical details about Extensible Web. Instead, I'm going to try to put the goals of the Extensible Web into context for you, into focus for you, so that you can understand the purpose, why we are shifting into this effort that we're calling Extensible Web. So the title of my presentation, the title I chose, is Web Reboot. And I will explain that actually at the end of the slides. And I'll talk about some other things in between. So please bear with me, and I will get to the point about Extensible Web. So my name's Michael Smith, and if you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle on Twitter is Sideshow Barker. And for those of you who haven't seen me speak before, I actually work for Keio University, so I'm based here in Japan, and at the Shonan Fujisawa campus, KOSFC. So if any of you are Keio students or you're involved in Keio in some way, feel free to come visit. The office on campus is Delta Building, Murai Sensei's wide project building. So we always like to have visitors come by, so definitely feel free to come by and visit anytime. So, wanted to briefly explain in very high-level terms what is this term Extensible Web. How many people have not heard this term Extensible Web? Anybody? Wow, okay, so there's actually people here. I thought everybody had heard this already. So let me give the context for that a little bit. Starting last year, a couple years ago, we had an effort that came up where we wanted to do some things differently. And mostly this did not come from the W3C or from the people working on standards or from even the people working on web browsers, but it came from developers like you guys. The entire momentum, the genesis, the beginning of the idea of the Extensible Web came from developers. So it came from the bottom up. A lot of what we do, I was going to say for better or worse, but actually for worse, a lot of what we do in standards with W3C and with browser implementations, it comes from the top down. We have people at the top who do things and we push the decisions down. And so what the Extensible Web is about, a big part of it, is instead of pushing from the top down, let's give developers a way to push from the bottom back up. You know, from your side as a web developer working on web technologies, give you some power to push changes back that they go from the bottom back up. And at a very high level, this is what the Extensible Web is fundamentally about. Shifting that direction of innovation in the opposite direction from how it's been happening for many years. Now, the Extensible Web started out with a document that's called the Extensible Web Manifesto. And usually in my slides, I use a lot of colors, and people find it annoying, but I like it. But I use red when there's something that I don't like. And I hate this word, manifesto. This is just an obnoxious word. Usually when people use the word manifesto, it's a political statement. You know, political parties make manifestos. So I'm not terrifically fond of this word, but this is the word that's been used since the beginning and where this came from. But the original use of this term was in a document that's actually called, funny enough, the Extensible Web Manifesto.org is one big URL, which is not the easiest thing to type in, but if you want to look at these slides later, you can follow that link, or you can, of course, just look this up on your own. But this is where it began. there's not much there. If you go look at that page and read it, I don't expect that you probably get all that much out of it. It doesn't give you a lot of insights into concretely like what we're trying to do with the extensible web work. Another thing that's come along more recently, though, that's a lot more interesting and useful, in my opinion, is this document that's called the Extensible Web Report Card. And I'm not a student anymore, so I like the word report card, okay. Actually, I'm a teacher, so I like report cards. I like to give report cards, so I put report card in green, because report cards are good things. Manifestos are shit, but report cards are great. So, so what this is about is, in concrete terms, taking some of the web technologies that we have created over the last few years and making a qualitative evaluation of those technologies. A value judgment about what's good about those technologies and what is bad, or which ones of those technologies are mostly good and which ones are mostly bad. And I'll show you this report card and tell you about a few things towards the end of this presentation. But this is probably the most useful resource right now if you want to learn about, specifically in a tangible way, what are we talking about with Extensible Web? This is a good thing to look at. And again, it's one of these URLs where it's all one big word. We have to come up with better ways to give addresses for these things. But that's what it is. So you can look at that page and look through it. For people here who do translations into Japanese, this would be a very good resource to translate. The problem, well, I say problem, it's not a problem, but the thing that makes translating it difficult is this is a living document that's getting updated semi-regularly. There's only a few people who've contributed to it so far, but the idea is to have more people contributing to it. So the task of translating it would be the task of keeping up with the people that are making changes to it upstream in English. But if you follow the work, it's just in a GitHub repo, and if you watch that repo and you keep up with the commits, you'll be able to keep up with the translation. And it's not that big of a document. I mean, it's not like translating the HTML spec or any spec, really. So I think this would be a very good target for doing some translation into Japanese for people here, for developers here. Okay, but before going too deep, even at all, into the details about Extensible Web, I want to get back to saying some things about fundamentals, the fundamentals of the web, because I think a lot of us, I mean, especially me until I started to prepare for this presentation, there's a lot of things that I forget about. Like, okay, why did I start working on this web stuff, 10 years ago or more now, since I got involved in standards? Why did I give up the other, highly paid work that I was doing to get this job working on this stuff? And in preparing for this presentation, I remembered why. And I hope to share with you why, and also to get you to understand that Extensible Web is just a way of getting back to the fundamentals of what the entire web was designed upon. So the motto for this presentation, Komatsu-san, who came up with this? Web is everywhere. Is that yours? Did you invent that? Or somebody else?
Yeah, but
okay, well, okay, it's a nice phrase. I like this phrase because this is a fundamental statement about the principle. It implies something that's core to the web. The web is everywhere. And I guess some people might say, well, the web isn't actually quite everywhere yet. There's some places where people don't have the web and can't use the web, and there's places where we want the web to be getting used. But I can say, at least, I could change this word, and I could say the web wants to be everywhere. And if you think of the web as an organism or as an entity like a person, you can start to think about, well, what does the web want to do? You think about it in those terms. Well, the web wants to be everywhere. And even more so than that, I can say the web is everything. The web wants to be everything. And that's a bit of an overstatement, but I'll explain what I mean by this. But I like this slogan quite a lot. Web is everywhere. The web wants to be everywhere. So, a statement that I think is really useful for understanding the goals of the web and why we're doing all this work is this. The web is the one information space that can contain all information spaces. This has been the intent of the web since the very beginning. Tim Berners-Lee created, in fact, I took this phrase from Tim Berners-Lee, but this is core that Tim built into the entire design of the web from the very beginning. And that's why we now have all this power that we are used to using to develop services and applications and ways to connect people together. It's because that's what the web was designed on from the very beginning. And so the other thing about the web is from the beginning, it's always been fundamentally extensible. This idea of coming up with an extensible web is nothing new. You know, Tim thought of that idea 25 years ago. That was an original core idea of the design of the web. So let me talk about what we mean by extensible. The web also, from the beginning, has been fundamentally universal. And this, if there's one word that it comes down to in the end, that's the most important word that you can ever remember to conceptualize the web, it's this word, universal. In fact, that we can go as far as to say that if you want to talk about it in terms of not an adjective but a noun, the web is universality. That is the characteristic that sets the web apart from every single other information system that's in use and that you can imagine. So let me say something more about some core principles. Anybody know who this guy is?
Tim?
That's Tim Berners-Lee, yeah. I don't know, Tim probably doesn't like me sharing this photo. And I don't know whether that's when he was in junior high school, could be college, who knows. But you know, if you know how Tim looks now, he doesn't quite have these bangs. So it's been a while. But that's Tim. And so what I want to say is, a lot of what I'm talking about here today comes from a book that Tim wrote that's called Weaving the Web. And I highly recommend reading this book. I understand that it's hard to get the Japanese translation right now. And eventually this book might go out of print, I don't know. But the better thing is, you can listen to this book. There's an audio version of this book. So I'm going to play a few snippets from this that are bits of audio where Tim talks about what he designed into the web. So let me switch out of this, switch into my Audacity.
The idea stayed with me that computers could become much more powerful if they could be programmed to link otherwise unconnected information.
For the web, those elements were, in decreasing order of importance, Universal Resource Identifiers, URIs, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, HTTP, and the Hypertext Markup Language, HTML.
So, the part that's important there is the part that I already just pointed out, which is universality. And let me play another snippet here. My Audacity is not cooperating. plan B on this?
Suppose all the information stored on computers everywhere were linked, I thought. Suppose I could program my computer to create a space in which anything could be linked to anything. All the bits of information in every computer at CERN and on the planet would be available to me and to everyone else. There would be a single global information space. Once a bit of information in that space was labeled with an address, I could tell my computer to get it. By being able to reference anything with equal ease, a computer could represent associations between things that might seem unrelated, but somehow did in fact share a relationship. A web of information would form.
Okay, let me play one more here.
Had to have one other fundamental property. It had to be completely decentralized. That would be the only way a new person, somewhere, could start to use it without asking for access from anyone else. I wanted the act of adding a new link to be trivial. If it was, then a web of links could spread evenly across the globe. So long as I didn't introduce some central link database, everything would scale nicely. There would be no special nodes, no special links. Any node would be able to link to any other node. This would give the system the flexibility that was needed and be the key to a universal system. The abstract document space it implied could contain every single item of information accessible over networks, and all the structure and linkages between them. Hypertext would be most powerful if it could conceivably point to absolutely anything. Every node, document, whatever it was called, would be fundamentally equivalent in some way. Each would have an address by which it could be referenced. They would all exist together in the same space, the information space.
I have one more to play here.
What we had accomplished so far was based on a few key principles learned through hard experience. The idea of universality was key. The basic revelation was that one information space could include them all, giving huge power and consistency. Many of the technical decisions arose from that. The need to encode the name or address of every information object in one URI string was apparent. The need to make all documents in some way equal was also essential. The system should not constrain the user. A person should be able to link with equal ease to any document, wherever it happened to be stored.
The fun.
So that's a lot of talk from Tim, and I'll put these waves into my slides afterwards. And when I post the slides, this stuff will be there, so you can listen to them. But I just want to go back and play that first one once again after.
The idea stayed with me that computers could become much more powerful if they could be programmed to link otherwise unconnected information.
All right, we'll get out of iTunes here. So fundamentally, there's a lot of things there, but another key word that comes into discussions here that's important almost as much as universality is decentralized. This word decentralized. And the other part that Tim designed early on was the idea of you could have two things that you didn't know that there was any connection between. Nobody else knew there was any connection between. But the web steps in there and it makes that connection. And that's another fundamental, super powerful piece of the web, is enabling and facilitating those connections between things that otherwise nobody discovered there was a connection between. I'm not going to talk so much about that part of it today, but just going then again through the goals, the original goals of the web. Tim designed the web from the very beginning to be this shared, universal information space. So universal again is important, but also shared is important there. The word decentralized, and this idea of linking unconnected bits of information and facilitating random associations is what he calls it, which is kind of quite similar. It's a restatement really of this idea of linking unconnected bits of information. So what made the web different? A big part of it was universal addresses and hypertext, and I'm going through this pretty quickly because I don't have too much time to go over it. But so the web was designed from the beginning to be this decentralized, shared global information space. And from the beginning, Tim called it the World Wide Web. I mean, this is a guy who's sitting in an office in Switzerland on his computer, with one computer he's designing this thing on, and he decides to call it the World Wide Web. Because that was the ambition from the very beginning, to make it something that was global and used across the whole world. But the one point I want to make here, on top of all of this, is that the web is not a set of technologies. You know, we think of the web, some of us think of the web as being HTML and CSS and HTTP. The thing is, none of those make the web what it is. What makes the web what it is this idea of universality and the principle of decentralization. So the web is universality, and the web can be everything. And so how does the extensible web then fit into all of this? Well, the extensible web is about going back to these fundamental core principles of the web. Okay, we spent a lot of years, it's been 25 years since the web was first invented. And there were quite a few years in between where I think collectively a lot of us lost sight of what the web was really about. And we kind of lost direction for a few years. Certainly up until 10 years ago, the web work kind of drifted off into a direction that turned out to be not the most productive direction. However, in the last 10 years, since 2004, 2005, we shifted into the work that we ended up calling HTML5 and the work on CSS3, and into these new areas of technology where we produced tons of new great features over the last 10 years. All these things, video, WebRTC, WebSockets, web workers, all these technologies that got added to the web. But again, the web is not a set of technologies. It's great that we're adding these features, but even during that time where we were doing all this productive innovation, we still lost sight of, okay, how do we enable innovation? You know, how do we get back to Tim's original vision of the web and making it a place where anybody could create something and anybody else can interact with it in the best way possible? Well, the extensible web is an attempt to take us back to getting to that direction again. The extensible web is about enabling what I am calling in this presentation decentralized innovation. So there's that word decentralized that gets back to the core, one of the core principles of the web, is that you should not have to go to, if you come up with a great idea for a web technology, or let's not even call it a web technology, but you come up with a great way for other people to have a different user experience than what they have now, and you want to get that out to people to use, we want to make that happen. We don't want you to have to come to the W3C and go through that top-down process again. And we don't want you, in fact, to have to go to browser vendors and beg browser vendors to say, here's my idea, you know, please implement my idea. We want you to have the power and the ability to innovate and get those features and get your ideas and get your new user experiences out to users much more quickly and easily. And we want to do this on a large scale. So the extensible web is about giving developers, that means you, the primitives, and normally I would put this word in green, but I wrote these slides like 10 minutes before I did this presentation. But this word is very important, primitives. But we want to give you, instead of calling it primitives, let's just say the tools, the pieces, the core fundamental bits that you need in order to innovate independently. And we haven't been doing that well so far, actually. We're doing better, but we still have a lot of areas where the web platform doesn't work as well as it should in this regard. There's another word, and I think Vint Cerf from the IETF and who now works for Google, I think he's the one that actually came up with this idea. But this is another term that you'll see being used these days, and this didn't actually come from Extensible Web at all. It comes from a higher political level, and it's used in the context more of this political, social problems that are going on with web governance. But I am repurposing this term for the purpose of Extensible Web, because this is what the Extensible Web is about. It's about permissive innovation. And it means, permissive innovation means you don't have to ask somebody else for permission to do something. You don't have to ask somebody else to do something to make it possible for you to deliver the kind of user experience that you want. The idea, ideally, is we get the web to the point where you can make those things yourself, and you have the power, and you have the ability, and you have the tools that you need to do that. So this comes down to freedom, giving you back your freedom as a developer to see your ideas become real on a large scale. Not just have, you know, some prototype that you can show, that you can say, here's my idea, now somebody else implement it. We want to make it possible so that you can take your idea and make it a reality on the web much more quickly, so that you have the freedom to do that without restrictions, without technical restrictions, and without others being in the way. And with that comes power. This is giving back power to you as an innovator, as a creator, as a maker, as a developer, to realize the ideas that you have and make them happen. So, how can you do this in concrete terms? Well, this is pretty much what I say in every single presentation that I do. You must get involved. You know, I know that most of you are doing some kind of work full-time. You may be doing client work or customer work where all of your time gets billed to some customer or client account, and you don't have free time to come in and get involved in making these changes to the core technologies of the web. But you have to. You have to find a way to get involved. If you want to make a difference, if you want to help us help you, we have to find some ways to help you get involved and to let you make a contribution. So one of the ways that you can do this, though, that's not super costly and that anybody's good at, is you can make some qualitative evaluations. You can make some value judgments about web technologies. And I think you already do this. As a web developer, if you have ever tried to work with an older browser API, well, let's just put it in very concrete terms. If you've ever tried to work with the W3C DOM directly without using jQuery or without using some library, it's a massive pain in the ass. It is horrible, you know, frustrating stuff to work with the core DOM APIs. And that's why jQuery is so powerful, because it takes away the need for you to get down there and deal with those core APIs. But the DOM itself, it may be the worst, I don't know, but there's lots of contenders for what's the worst API that we've come up with over the last 20 years. But what you can do is help us do that. You know, look at the APIs that have been created and go in there and say, listen, I'm a developer and I've been trying to use this API and this thing is just crap. You know, you guys got to do better than this. And so you need to provide that kind of feedback. Don't just passively, okay, I got 10 minutes. Don't just passively take what browser vendors give to you or what the W3C gives to you or even the WhatWeG or anybody else who's pushing technologies out to you. You must get in there and you must evaluate what you're being fed and say, listen, this is not what I want. You know, this does not work for my needs. And we've got to create a way for people to be able to do that. So you can do this, and it doesn't cost a lot of time. It doesn't cost a huge amount of time to complain, because I know I complain all the time about all kinds of stuff. It's pretty cheap and not too costly. But to complain in a productive, constructive way is a little harder. But here's what you can do. One thing is you can do is help with the development of this Extensible Web report card. And I was hoping to have more time to show this in detail to you, but I'll go through it quickly and just show you, Christ. Let me see if this will work better if I put it into, yeah. The sidebar is gone. God damn it, Dominic. All right, let me crank the font size up real quick. So what the Extensible Web report card does is it divides web technologies into 3 areas. So far, I mean, there probably could be more. And I think Dominic DeNicola, who works for Google now, and he's a member, or a former member, I guess now, of W3C, the technical architecture group, that's the technical leadership of W3C. But he's a funny guy and creative. And I think he's the one that came up with these. But he classifies them into plays well with others. So this is like the school metaphor. When you're in school, you get evaluated not just based on your academic performance, but based on your social interaction. And if you're good, it's called, in schools, I think in English-speaking schools, they say, well, he plays well with others. And so this is a list of things which are examples of good web technologies that we've managed to come up with in the last few years. Service worker, I think, well, these are all debatable too. The level of goodness of some of these is open to debate. But you can see there's a list of a few of those. So what you could do is help expand this list to say, okay, what's a good API that you like, that's an example of something you would like the people creating these standards to make things more like that. What's a good API that's a new one. But another area is this, disruptive in class. That's the kid who's telling jokes and makes trouble, makes the teacher embarrassed, says inappropriate things. And this is a list of some behavior problems and specs that we have. Web audio API. So again, I mean, these are qualitative judgments. And then the final area is runs with scissors. So the idea is, this is what your mom tells you when you're a kid, when you're running with scissors in the house, don't run with scissors, you're going to poke your eye out. So this is like the worst of the stuff. These are the problem, really just bad behavior specifications. And you can see the list there. I don't know for sure if this is, how Dominic or whoever originally created this is the meaning that they had. But from looking through this over the last couple of days, that does seem to be kind of the classification that he's come up with. And so if you go back and look at this document, you can see there's descriptions of what are some problems with these. Let me go to something like web audio. Well, so you can see there's paragraphs of this that say areas for improvement across the platform really enlarged. The layering story about how web audio explains other APIs remains problematic. So there's statements like this. Okay, what's wrong with this? What's good about this API? What's wrong with it that needs to be fixed? And that's the kind of information we want to collect. And this is a good place so far to put that information and for people to work on it together. So this is one area where you can get involved. And I got 5 minutes, and I promised I would leave time for questions. So let me quickly go through the rest of this. So what I want to say is please help us improve. And if you have questions about how to get involved or what you can do, talk to me, talk to Daniel Davis, talk to Robin Bergeon, who's here. The other people who our full-time job is figuring out how to make this happen. This is our job. How do we make the web better? So it's nice to have this job, but it's nicer to have people helping me do that job and helping us do that job. So that's where you can help out. So you can share your ideas. Let us know what these problem areas are, and let's innovate together. Let's make this, again, a project where we're working as a team and working as a group around the world to improve the web together. One thing I want to get back to as far as the idea, the original title of my slides, Web Reboot, is the point that I had originally here was that in 2004, 2005, when XHR came along, and AJAX, as some people call it, that fundamentally changed the web. That's the single biggest innovation that happened in the web in the last 20 years. And we are still riding on that innovation. We are still in the phase of time where that's the biggest single thing that came along. But I will tell you that we are now again, and you are very lucky to be alive and be a web developer in 2015, because we are again in the midst of fundamental changes to the web. And so I would say we are again in a web reboot, and you have the opportunity to be involved, and you have the opportunity to make sure it works out well. So you can be part of it, you. So please do be part of it, and that's my presentation. Thank you. So we have a few minutes for questions. If somebody wants to ask a question, please.
I think one question is
Okay.
okay.
一つだけ。
一つだけ。日本語でも多分大丈夫。
日本語でも大丈夫です。
マイク聞くだけならできるんで。喋れる。大丈夫。
Well, so you guys are going to have the panel discussion later to talk about this.
Yeah.
So people have ideas, and that might be a better time to ask during the panel discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, じゃあ皆さんありがとうございます。